Hi all, Rick here with my review and impressions of Star Trek Discovery's Season 3 Episode 4, Forget Me Not. As usual, I will be talking spoilers about the series so far. So I'm liking the episode lengths as well. Few of the episodes have felt rushed and the pacing remains consistent. This episode does a lot of exploring the stress the crew is under through using Culber's narration to highlight the issues with many of the cast of characters, but we also get to visit a familiar species of Trek lore, the Trill. The planet Trill has seldom been seen in Star Trek. Only the underground caves were ever seen in the shows, and the Trill pools were recreated in beautiful detail, including the visible shocks that run through the cloudy water between the eels as they communicate with one another. It was great to see something familiar in Discovery. The Guardians, as an order, those unjoined Trill who are appointed to watch over the symbionts, are still present, and still rather protective, prioritising the symbionts over all, even the restrictions of their culture. We learn that somehow the burn caused devastation to the population of symbionts. The way this was delivered made it rather obscure as to how the two events are connected, but it sounds like many of the compatible joined Trill were caught off-world and either never returned or were on unfortunate starships when the burn came. I'll get back to that in a minute. So, we get the history of the Tull symbiont, which until now has had an interrupted connection to its human host Adira due to her repressing her own memories of the circumstances of the joining. They brought to light the point I made last time, that Adira is uncertain if she is a genius because of the joining, and how that makes her feel, but things get more complicated by the return of her memories. So yeah, a human being a symbiont host is a weird situation that can happen, although it's very rare and usually reserved for emergencies. It seems that this Grey was supposed to inherit Tull from Admiral Senatal, but because of some explosions, the cause still unrevealed, the ship they were travelling on was damaged and Grey was fatally injured. The symbiont was then moved to Adira to keep it alive, and this whole trauma and mess caused Adira to repress this incident, which in turn prevented a complete joining of symbiont and host. I really liked how they portrayed the sort of mind realm that Adira and Burnham ended up being immersed in, with these tendrils of thought sort of representing the symbionts. One thing that gets brought up is that a Trill-human joining has never been stable. We saw this with Odan being joined to Riker in 2367, where the joining worked in the same fashion as it would were it a Trill host, but Riker's immune system would have eventually killed the symbiont. How this process has been averted in Adira is a mystery, and apparently the first time it's ever been recorded. The Trill are super protective of their symbionts. I mean, they didn't even openly tell Starfleet about them until 2367, although it's likely the UFP as an entity knew but respected their privacy. On top of this, the Symbiosis Commission had been lying for hundreds of years by saying that not all Trill were biologically compatible with a symbiont, when in fact almost half were. This was all to protect the symbionts from negative exposure and ensure a screening process that regulated the passage of symbionts through, quotes, deserving individuals. It seems that this selective process may have continued despite the revelation, as they make mention that the Trill's population of compatible hosts has severely diminished, which probably is as much of a lie now as it was back in Deep Space Nine. Now Adira turns up, not only joined, but a stable human host, and threatens to upend the tradition all over again. It's also mentioned that the Trills have never forcibly separated joined host and symbiont, but this is also false, as Joran Dax was forcibly separated, but to be fair, his existence as well as the whole half the population thing were classified, and even the Dax's symbionts' memories were suppressed, so it looks like the lies of the Symbiosis Commission have continued in the Federation's absence. One of the 6 prior hosts of Tull I noticed was in a Picard-era Starfleet uniform dating back to 2399, so Tull is around 790 years old, which makes it way older than Dax. But Dax was unlucky, and as far as I'm aware, at least 3 of the 9 Dax Trill died prematurely. At first, I thought this was full of continuity errors, but after refreshing my lore, turns out not so much. The biggest issue really is Tal being so old with so few hosts. This episode ends with a promise of Trill rejoining the Federation should it return, which continues the reassembly of the UFP's disparate pieces. We also have the fact that Adira, now aware of the prior Tal memories, is still seeing the manifestations of Grey. This is done voluntarily through a Trill ritual called the Rite of Emergence, but it seems that Adira may have done this inadvertently by not wanting to let go of Grey. Moving on to the tension among the crew now, and as expected, the loss of their former lives continues to weigh on them and flare up. The fact that this is explored from Culber's POV is a good decision, continuing to utilise the entirety of the cast. His empathic compassion is a good stand-in for the role a ship's counsellor would normally fill. The stress of being cast adrift is told through the experiences of primarily 3 of the crew: Stamets, who immersed himself defensively in work, Tilly, who is searching for comfort, and Detmer, whose, repression is causing a seething resentment. In fact, it's this last character whose exchanges with Culber bracket this episode, from stating that she's fine to admitting that she's not. This is a good highlight of how extended pressure and stress can eat away at a person, especially if they are unaware, unable or unwilling to deal with it, something I think everyone on the planet can identify with. Saru's attempted officer's dinner might not have ended the way he'd hoped, but in many ways it was still therapeutic as it brought the crew's denial at feeling helpless to the surface, causing them to confront it individually and as a unit. Burnham gets called out as a responsibility hoarder, which is certainly her go-to approach, and we get to see her continue on a more warming path, with Culber narrating her growth in the same way he was used to narrate the crew's issues. That being said, warmth isn't Burnham's only developing trait, as we see her act out against the Trill guards who are set on retrieving the symbiont. That being said, she's always proved that she was willing to oppose protocol, so I shouldn't be too surprised that she floored the guards rather quickly. She just seems more accepting of her acting out now she's had a year-long taste of freedom from the uniform. Finally, we have the re-emergence of the sphere data as a plot point, with it seemingly merging with the ship's limited computer AI to create something that can think outside of the box, akin to the form it had taken by the time of the potential future witnessed in Calypso. Hopefully we can have a nice AI this time, instead of an evil killy one. I want to know where these coordinates for locating the remnants of the UFP lead. Clearly somewhere unexpected to Burnham, so I'm guessing beyond the galactic barrier of the Milky Way, somewhere beyond the edge of the galaxy. What's your guess? So far, I think the 32nd century has done well for suiting Star Trek Discovery, taking it far away from an era that I think the show never really knew how to deal with. It does kind of feel like Discovery has finally found its place and style, and I hope it sticks, as I think the prior seasons floundered around the midway point. But I'm optimistic so far. So thanks for watching this review, and I'll see you next time for another Trek or Sci-Fi video. I've been Rick, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.